Thanks, Mick. Some brilliant points there, brilliant information. We've had a lot of slides so far, so what we're going to do now is go into more of a conversational type format with Mick and two farmers. The first farmer I'm going to introduce is John MacNamara from Knockany in County Limerick. He farms in Knockany with his wife Olivia and children Caoimhe, Pádraig, Alba and Conor. Now, a lot of us probably have had the privilege of being on this farm, and it to me, and no offence to any of the other farmers I know in the room, but it's probably the cleanest farm area I've ever set foot in. It's immaculate. Immaculate. That was, listening to John, that was something passed down from his father, and he takes a lot of pride in that. The cumulative effect of that attention to detail and that pride in the farm means that John and the family were recognised with the NDC and Kerrygold champion in 2023. John and the family and the team were also Grass 10 2018 Grassland Farmer of the Year winners overall. And a similar team to a lot of the speakers today as well, with the second speaker I'm going to introduce and Chris Catt later on. John won the FBD Young Farmer of the Year in 2005. The MacNamara family grew 15.5 tonne in 2025, so we've answered Mick's question already. To continue the theme of describing the speakers as sports people with the list of honours there that John has, you could be described as maybe a Declan Hannon or something like that, much as I hate to say it, John. So we'll invite John up, we'll give him a quick round of applause there. Farmer I'm going to invite up is Kevin Moran. So Kevin is a native of Claremorris, County Mayo. This is very important. He stressed this one because he often is described as farming in Galway, which he is in Carlisle, but he is a Mayo man. Although he is married to the lovely Dervla, who is from County Galway, and they're still trying to figure out where their 3-year-old girl, Shoga, is from Mayo or Galway, so that might go down to the Connacht Championship this year and they'll figure that one out. Again, to list the roll of honour here, and not to embarrass anyone, but Kevin won the FBD Mocker Student of the Year in 2013, and the same was, you won the Young Farmer, John, was it? Yeah. And the FBD Mocker Young Farmer in 2016, and completed an Nuffield Scholar in 2015. The title was Access to Finance, the Challenge in Converting the Intangible into Tangible. And I suppose a lot of us would remember Kevin early on starting out. It was such a unique story, and getting refused finance, and the way that he got into farming and built a really good business based around grass. And it's actually 10 years on now pretty much, and it's brilliant to check back in with Kevin and see where he's driven the farm to. The farm grew 16.2 tonne dry matter per hectare in 2025, and as Kevin is the Mayo man, I have no sporting idol to compare him to. So he's just going to have to rely on all his agricultural achievements. We'll invite Kevin up on the stage and give him a quick round of applause. So Kevin is up, we're going to sit down. The format is Mick is going to get stuck into a couple of key topics, and I'm going to share a few questions on the other cornerback position and from the floor, and we want as much engagement as possible because we're coming up to lunchtime now. You've got two of the top farmers and we've got one of the top researchers in the country, and it's trying to get out how are we going to get back to 15 tonne. So Mick, I'm going to pass over to you.
John. Yeah, Michael. Where are we as regards non-negotiables, as regards your farm?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, Michael,
give us, before we start, give us an introduction of what you're doing, what you're achieving, how it's being done, and Kevin will prove it.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, I suppose it gives me, great pleasure to have the opportunity to, just to give you a couple of examples of what we do at home. Certainly we don't do anything different than an awful lot of people in this room. And I suppose I couldn't have done it without an awful lot of help. But I suppose first of all, just to thank the Irish Grassland Association, I suppose for inviting me here today and inviting our family here, to, I suppose, portray to you what we try to do good at home and what we feel works at home. And also, I suppose, look, with my Grass 10 hat on, I suppose just to thank the Irish Grassland Association, for what they do and for what they deliver, in promoting grass. And, because, listening to Michael Ward last night, for those who had, you know, pleasure of being here and the opportunity to listen to him. You know, he really spoke about, you know, that's what we're good at in this country, you know, and we just go and get better at it. You know, and it's a simple message. So I suppose where I'm coming from, first of all, John, thanks for the introduction. Declan Hannon's retired, actually, by the way. So I don't know whether that was what you were hinting at there or not, but Padraig, my own son, is here today. I don't think he intends me to retire anytime really soon, but the interesting point is that starts me off is that I suppose Dad transferred the farm to me when I was 19. And I suppose it was interesting again with Michael Ward last night. His dad died when he was very, very young. And it gave him an opportunity to immediately, you know, he just had to take it on. You know, I suppose slightly different with me, Dad was still there, but he did transfer the farm to me when I was 19. My two sisters were still in primary school at the time. So, Padraig has just turned 19. John is talking about Declan Hannon retired. So Padraig, I'm not sure where you are there, but let's talk about it. Okay, so I suppose, just look, we run a very simple operation, grass-based system in Knockany, parish of Knockany in County Limerick. John is correct, we use it as a family operation. And I suppose to me, it's really about being efficient, being simple, you know, and trying to grow as much grass as you possibly can. And the reason for that is because grass is probably 5 steps from your back door. So you've got to be good at it, right? I suppose, look, 20 years ago, John mentioned there with the young farmer competition. I can really remember at that time, I was never great at maths or whatever, but there was a pie chart, I think it was a circle anyway, divided into 4 quarters. It was grass, cows, milk, money. Okay, I put that up in front of Albert Reynolds, who was the chair of the judging panel at that time, and Albert just said to me, John, now maybe, look, I didn't know Albert personally, maybe some lads do here. Albert said to me, like, is that sustainable? Maybe he was just, you know, throwing me off with it. And I said to him, the one thing with it, Albert, is, I said, I'm in control of it. And I suppose that hasn't changed, right? So what I mean by that is, okay, so, like, the grass is outside your door, you know, you can put whatever cows you want onto it, you know, you have the opportunity to grow lots of it, and I suppose that's what we intend doing. I suppose I wouldn't be where we are without our family, and my wife Olivia, and I suppose the staff that have helped us over the years as well, and that's crucially important. So I suppose, look, you know, other than that, I suppose the only other thing we probably do at home is that, you know, we do a bit of work with schools. I talk at schools, and we bring a lot of schools onto the farm, and I suppose the whole aim here is to show really, you know, how you can produce a consumer product, you know, in Ireland from a grass-based system, you know, and you have a superior product at the end of the day. And that's all we're trying to do, no different than a lot of people in this room. And I suppose, look, it's working for us in Knockany at the moment, and I suppose, look, if we can put a bit of that out to you today, let's try and do that.
So, that's John's scenario. Many of you have been on this farm, so we know what we want to get here. We'll get back to the question. Kevin, I didn't realize it was only 10 years into farming, but you know, the strides you've made in the last 10 years of understanding, so let's hear your introduction as well now.
Yeah, so I suppose just to reiterate what John Mack said, you know, thanks very much to the Irish Grasslands Association for the privilege of having me here, and thanks for all the great work indeed you do. So as John described, I'm definitely from Mayo. I'm definitely a Mayo man, and I'd like to remind him that Mayo won the Nicky Rackard Cup in 2016. Yeah, so I suppose I'm the youngest of 11, and growing up, I suppose I was absolutely, like, I went to St. Coleman's Secondary School in Claremorris, and there was probably 700 or 800 students in there. And I remember the principal at the time telling me I was throwing my life away because I wanted to be a farmer. He told me to get a right job. You know, I suppose the thing I told him was that 700 or 800 students in here, not one of them can match me for the clarity in terms of what they want to do, because I was absolutely certain that I wanted to be a farmer. So I suppose the home farm probably wasn't suitable. It wasn't really a dairy farm as such. So shortly after my leaving cert, I leased a farm from my uncle in Galway, and so we started off at 72 cows and have built up to 260 since then by leasing and buying labour and ground. So that's what's got me here today.
Okay. So let's get into the meat and drink of what we want to achieve here. John, I want you to tell us. Grazing, 2 guys here, you know, without knowing flowers at them, 2 guys here who can produce 15 tonne of grass on average for the last 5 years. Not too many people in the country have done that. So John, I want you to just describe what are the non-negotiables for you as regards, you know, getting that sort of production into the system.
Yeah. Okay. So so I suppose, Michael, maybe just 3 non-negotiables, right? I suppose first of all, soil fertility. That's number 1, right? Number 2, reseeding, and number 3 is walking the farm. And I suppose what I mean by that, maybe Michael, sorry, you're probably going to ask me what exactly I mean. So like soil fertility is soil testing, once a year, every single paddock, and then it's acting on it. And it's actually really good to see, where, you soil test last year, soil test this year, what you've done in the meantime, and you see it's improving. That's a buzz. You're doing right, you're interested in it, and it's working. Okay? We can't grow Clover without having that soil right, Michael, so that's right. Reseeding is number 2, and I suppose where I come from in reseeding is, you've mentioned, Michael, we're consistent over the last 5 years, but that's down to reseeding. If you have a lot of farm reseeded in the last 3 years, them droughts won't affect you anywhere near as bad. Because that reseeded ground, can really grow well. And I suppose that's the question, maybe Michael, I will throw back to you again, how are we doing on the varieties and stuff, and can we keep improving? And my third one is, Michael, just to finish, is on walking the farm. Okay? And I suppose I mentioned 20 years ago when we started at this, we were walking the farm, a couple of times a year. We built it up over the years, and maybe 5-6 years ago I thought 30 walks was really good. But now that's not good enough. Because of the growth rates of these reseeded paddocks, especially through that summer period of May, June, July, you need to be walking twice a week, and now we're probably over 50 walks. And that probably is the kernel driver of what we do, because we're proactive rather than reactive, Michael.
Okay. So what's the annual input of, let's say, P&K lime to you? Are you putting lime out every year, or every second year? What's the
Yeah, so Michael, we're just working on the results, okay? So if something is 5.8, 5.9, we know where the targets are. We know we need to get to 6.2, 6.3. We know the paddocks needed. So, if we put extra ground on the system, maybe 7-8 years ago they were releasing, and we've had to go every second year for 3 years running. So it took us 6 to 7 years to build that up, and that was 2 ton lime every second year to get it up. So, and Michael, the P's and K's, look. You won't grow the grass. The clover is a new thing we're into. You have to have the P's and K's correct.
Kevin, just on the reseeding, taking it to soil fertility is a similar story for you.
Yeah.
Or is it different?
No, it's very similar. Yeah, very similar in that. I suppose on the reseeding,
just give us your practice, how you manage that across the season. You're 16 ton, over 16 ton this year. Reseed every year. How are you manipulating that into the system that you're not losing dry matter?
So I suppose I'm religiously doing between 12 and 15% a year of the platform is reseeded, and even I remember in 2022 the cost of reseeding was enormous, and it would have been pretty easy to say I'll take a year out, but I suppose the issue I found is if you ever try that what happens is then the following year you've 30% to go and reseed. You're also growing less because you've a year of less freshly reseeded pastures. So what ends up, it gets compounded, and it's even more difficult because the pinch gets there's a greater pinch in terms of trying to get that area out then, because you're trying to do 2 years reseeding in one. So I think it's very, very important to never ever take a break from reseeding, no matter what. Even if there's a drought, there's always a reason not to reseed, and it's really important to have that discipline to push through. So between 12 to 15% a year we reseed, which I like to bring it back and make it simple. It's 2 paddocks. So we'll typically take out the first paddock to reseed. We'll identify it the previous autumn or year in based on tonnage grown usually and varieties. And then the first paddock gets taken out the start of April, weather permitted. And as soon as that paddock is back to a cover of 500-600, it's got its post-emergence, we then burn off the second paddock, so that we can keep our mid-season stocking rate at about 3.5, because you're trying to manage, feed the cow really, really well and not leave the system under too much pressure, to be able to take out surpluses to keep quality in the sward midsummer.
So that paddock is out from mid-April, and the second paddock goes out. Overall, 500-600 on that.
Yeah. So typically, you're probably talking early June when you're taking out that second paddock.
And what kind of production would you think those freshly reseeded paddocks will grow in their maiden year?
Sure, look, year end when you go back to look at it, it surprises you. Like year end when you go back to look at it, they're thereabouts in terms of the average, but it's the following year then when they're up there and they're propping up your average, you know, they're 2 ton ahead of your average growth. But for me it's more about the system and keeping the whole farm at 15 ton, because I think for me one of the big reasons of why, Mick, if I'm being honest, is like so much of Lawrence's presentation and so much of your presentation and so much of what I see in our discussion groups is that we've gone from a high nitrogen input system to, because of regulatory pressure, we're gone to a low nitrogen input system. The only farms I see still doing 15 ton are the ones that are doing reseeding and clover really well, because nitrogen probably was masking performance to an extent. It was a simpler system for sure.
Michael, I think you can get your return in 1 year in reseeding. Okay, I think Teagasc have maybe said something different, or maybe research out there, but I think you can get it back in 1 year. Like we have grown probably 10 ton in that maiden year. Okay, and like that's straight away, if you can get it in that target, if you can get it in that 60 days, you know, where the cows are grazing it today, you get in whatever. But the big thing with reseeding, and I think Kevin mentioned it there, you mentioned it there, Kevin, it's been planned and been organised. It's deciding, we'll say, in the autumn, what field you do next spring, and not deciding when you get the first dry week in April, I must decide which paddock I'll reseed, because that doesn't work anymore.
That's what's going on.
Well,
Okay.
I didn't say that. What I'm saying is Michael Paddock decided, because also another bugger that I would have would be weed control. And weed control is hugely important. And you cannot control the weeds if you're not ahead of the weeds.
Okay. 2 of you guys have clover. John, you have no clover in 2020. I know you have a nice bit of clover. You can tell us, we'll get into the middle of it. When you start oversowing, the 2 of you are now part of, let's say, successful oversowing, let's say, farm systems. What happens in that scenario? What happens in the oversowing? Are you doing? Yes, go.
Okay. Yeah, these questions are hot and heavy, Michael. So yeah, there's a lot of work with oversowing. Okay, the whole oversowing is probably new to me. I'm learning on it, Michael, because I suppose the one thing what I tried this year was, I suppose I imagine now with maybe 3 years, you're probably correct, with nudging maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Okay, so it's certainly much easier to establish clover in a reseed. Okay, so that's one thing I've learned. But just by reseeding, you won't get there quick enough. Okay, so you've got to oversow as well. And it's something that I've been trying to push on the Grass 10 team as well, that they included both times, so oversowing as well as reseeding whenever they're doing the demonstrations. It's hugely important. I suppose the one thing I've learned is that we've tried oversowing with fertilizer spreader, we've tried oversowing with a couple of things. The earth seeder seems to be the best one that we've used certainly in the last 2 seasons. Secondly then, what I tried in 2025, we actually cut the paddock for bale silage, say in round 2, which would sort of never have been done before. And we got a much better take on the oversown of clover than we put in the end of April on, we'll say, the paddock that had been taken for silage, we'll say. Rather than, you know, you can graze a paddock really well and go in and do it in that, but we just got a better take on it, on the silage one. Like. So that's just something different we did in 2025.
Earth seeder.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes, so the similar story to John, there was no clover was a weed in 2019, and then all of a sudden in 2020 it was gospel. I suppose there was a missed opportunity there in terms of the amount of reseeding that was done up to that point that could have been incorporating clover. So the thing for me with clover is, like the why of clover is that, you know, if you want to maintain the 15 ton for me is what my entire business is built on. And it's one of the biggest KPIs, that and 6-week calving rate are probably the 2 main KPIs the whole thing is built on, and everything is under those 2 umbrellas. To protect that 15 ton, you know, regulatory pressures are telling us that we can spread less and less chemical nitrogen. And so I would far prefer to be just perennial ryegrass and 250 kilos of chemical nitrogen. It's a simpler system, but that's not the reality, and the reality is that we're going to have to spread less. But I wanted to maintain the 15 tons. So that was my why. And if you want clover, it's a 5 to 7 year strategy, a 5 to 7 year plan, whereby you're year in, year out, you're following a plan and you're following it through. And you can't turn around overnight and say, okay, do you know what, I'm going to grow 15 ton with 170 or 80 kilos of chemical in. So oversowing was a big part of that, because when I sat down and looked at it, reseeding alone wasn't going to get me there. So with the oversowing, we picked a paddock that because of either a paddock that has lost clover or a paddock that is an open new sward that's not going to be reseeded within the next 2 or 3 years. We identify it in autumn. So we'll close it it probably carries one of the heavier covers and we're closing it because we want that farm cover to open in spring. So it's one of those paddocks that we want to graze earlier so that we can graze it at the start of the second rotation in April, and then we get in with an air seeder and oversow it. And we'll give it thick slatted. We have 2 types of slurry, lagoon slurry and slatted house slurry. So slatted house slurry is far higher dry matter. So it gets that in early spring after the first grazing, purely for the pea that's in it. And then once we oversow it, it'll get lagoon slurry. I give it full rate in for that first summer because the white clover that you're developing, it's like putting, it's putting something through college. It's the following year you're going to reap the rewards out of it, I find. But then you just graze it every second Monday for 3 grazings. So it's every 14 days. And you drip feed it with something like 18-6-12 or something after each grazing.
Okay. So just to break it up and give the audience an input into this, and I want to take a couple of short questions from the audience, and then we're going to get stuck into grazing management and grazing management here. So, got 2 roving mics. I'd like a couple of questions on the two topics we just dealt with.
The question for both farmers: what proportion of clover have you in pastures, and what percentage of the farm have you in clover, and what is your chemical in plan and slurry plan? What way does that work for the year?
So it's a great question, and it's this is the time of year you need to the time of year that I'm not going to sit up here and preach from the pulpit, so what I'm doing isn't necessarily right, but so having that plan in place is really important. So my plan is 100 kilos in per hectare by the 1st of May. That's combined chemical and slurry. In terms of the clover, so everything gets treated the same in spring, whether it's clover or not. And from the 1st of May onwards, there's either enough of clover there to go half rate or there isn't. So I don't personally buy into this percentage thing that there's 10% clover, there's 20% clover. There's either enough of clover there to go half rate or there isn't. And the odd time you go half rate and all of a sudden that paddock isn't performing and you realise, well, there isn't enough of clover there. So just to be clear, from the 1st of May onwards, non-clover paddocks get chemical in at a rate of about 0.8 of a unit per day, depending on the rotation length. And our clover paddocks get lagoon slurry. So it's really watery. And so we get our contractor in every 10 days and he just follows the cows around, whatever they've grazed. The clover paddocks get that. And that's the nitrogen plan. In terms of the content, so I don't really buy into the whole percentage thing because I think it's really subjective. But in terms of the platform, I think there's about, it varies based on the source. So it's scored 3 times a year by Moorepark, so we're in the 150 group. But I think at the moment there's about 70 to 75% of the platform with the clover content of over 20%. And mixed after asking how much nitrogen we used last year. So chemical in, we used 180 kilos of chemical in per hectare last year.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Michael. So just on the percentages, look, similar to Kevin probably on the procedure through the slurry and the fertilizer and the different times. Just to maybe reiterate on that one, I'm probably more adamant that it's the management, it's the grazing management of the clover in year 1, rather than even the nitrogen that you actually put out on it. What I mean by that is making sure that you graze that oversowed paddock, probably 13 or 14 times in the year. To make sure that it's been constantly grazed at low covers, rather than, getting carried away of whether you put on like 10 units of nitrogen or 12 units of nitrogen, whether it's pala washings or whatever. It's just to make sure that you get in and make sure the light keeps getting onto the clover. Just a percentage-wise, Michael, we would have, 25% of the farm in total, and probably about 70% of the paddocks now in clover at this stage. Different levels. And I suppose, look, 165 kilos of chemical in went out last year, and that was topped up with the slurry, we'll say. So look, I suppose, maybe a quick question, Michael, that maybe, I'd like to throw back to you is like on the Clover varieties and stuff, like how are we doing there? Like are we constantly improving the varieties of Clover that are out there?
Good question, John. Where we are with them now is, I think there's probably a new given where we are with nitrogen, given where we are with Clover, white Clover specifically, as part of the grazing system. There's probably more focus now on the traits that Clover can give you. What we're now after, based on what these guys are at and what you're at, is trying to identify clovers that have high nitrogen fixation that you saw in that graph there. So now the new focus for us, and with a couple of PhDs working on it, is, what is the trait of how much nitrogen are these clovers fixing, and what is the clover content that they're averaging across the season. So we've got a new piece of work on this, and there's a couple of new varieties coming through that they are better in nitrogen fixation, and by default that is higher productivity and more clover content. So, and that's going across 5 cycles. So it's a bit like the varieties before. We used to negate varieties because of heading date. That's probably lesser of an identifier now, because we're looking at the people. Where we're going out with this is we want to take this into a clover profit index. But the best clovers out there are the ones now, John, that can fix more nitrogen. They can fix more nitrogen in combination with chemical nitrogen, and that means more grass produced.
Yeah, and Michael, are these available to us? And sorry, now I'm kind of taking the Paddy O'Keefe role here that you mentioned earlier. A lot of mercy Paddy O'Keefe, because that day in that car, that conference for me was in the car rather than afterwards. Michael, are different varieties, like, are they available to us? Can Kevin and myself use the best Clover varieties and the best grass varieties in 2026?
Well, everybody should be able to use them. So I'd recommend the list coming through has probably the newer ones coming through are the ones with better indices. Obviously, we want more identifiers to pick out what's better. But like there's Aberher, I want to name them all, but Aberher, Clover, and Galway. The new ones coming through are outclassing the old ones. And the thing about Clover is, the oldest Clover is still on the list for about 25 years. It's not like bulls. A bull wouldn't be there for 25 years. These things have to come, they have to go, they have to do the time, and then they have to, the door opens to another Clover. So what will happen, I would see, is that breeders will get more focused on breeding these type of clovers with these traits, and we'll get the throughput out. Same as we're getting the better throughput with grass varieties. But John, yes, it's about infixation. What more in is fixed by a clover is square.
Gentlemen, we're all on the one page as regards the benefits of reseeding. We'll say Teagasc advice seems to set our face against min-till as a way of doing a full reseed using glyphosate, and it's a very cost competitive way of doing it, and I'm just wondering to know, have any two farmers on the panel used that, because it is a very cost competitive way of doing it. And why have Teagasc kind of stepped away from using a drill like a Cutler drill or something that it's kind of not recommended anyway? Why?
Your answer first.
Yeah, so John, thanks for the question, John. Yeah, so John, like I suppose ours is just, Michael, so there's no ploughing done with us anymore really, because it's all just like a couple of runs of the disc harrow, depending on how well the spray has worked, whether we have to go the extra run of the disc harrow or not, and then it's either like 1 or 2 runs of the power harrow. Ideally just 1 run of the power harrow, because we're watching the cost point of view as well. So it's really to make sure that, I suppose, that your spray is done correctly, done as quickly as you possibly can, and then to give it enough of time. And then, normally it's just like possibly 2 runs of disc harrow, 1 run of a power harrow is probably the ideal scenario, and that often works quite well. But look, I haven't always got that right, John. We've had occasions where too many sods have been turned up afterwards, and where that doesn't look the ideal thing, and we've probably wasted a bit of seed. It has always worked out okay at the end of the year and the following year, but you'd like to try and get that right if you could.
Similar to that. So I've tried the min-till. I've tried pretty much every option there is at this stage. And I suppose our preferred option is very similar to John's, where we disc it. But I think it's important that seed bed, that fine firm seedbed is really important. And sometimes when historically when I've dissed it, we haven't achieved that. One of I think Michael Ward will be twisting and turning in his seat when I say I don't like ploughing because there's too many stones to pick after. He loves a bit of hard work, but it's a labour thing as well. But you're also turning down a lot of the fertile soil as well. So in the mint hill I found it's slower it's just, maybe it was the year that we done it, 2023, it was very slow to actually come and get going, and I felt there was a window of opportunity there for weeds to creep back in. For that reason, then we disc it 3 or 4 times. If it's not dry enough, if it's not fine enough, we leave it for a few days and come back and disc it again. But that initial glyphosate is so important, and it's something I've got wrong in the past in terms of not having enough patience to allow it to work, or doing it at the right stage. Doing it straight away after the cows come out of it, versus allowing it to actually regrow, and having that bit of patience to get it right was one of the disciplines I've learned through Reseeding.
Okay, John, and the question on the mint hill and Teagasc. I think, ultimately what we're talking about is best Reseeding method is where you can't, before you sow the sward, that you can't differentiate whether it's ploughed, disc, or either mint hill. And once the soil is firm and is well compacted, well cultivated, that differentiation that you don't know whether what method was used is really the best method. So that's really the line we're taking on Reseeding. I'll hold that question if you don't mind. I want to get into grazing management. So this is where the differences are really taking place on farms. So I want to start the grazing season in August. John, where are you first week of August, grassroots? I want Kevin to come in then. Where are you first? What's the cover on the farm? What's rotation? Are you off concentrate? Where are you going?
What do you mean, Michael? So, explain. So, what you the 1st of August? Are you saying that's the start of the grass year, or where are you?
I'm starting the grass year at 1st of August.
Okay.
Because the grass year doesn't start in the spring.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and if you're still around, okay, all right. Yes, Michael, look, I'm not going to disagree with you. I think it's a very key message that, I suppose the way I look at things on the farm at home would be that, you won't have it in the spring if you don't actually have it right in the autumn. So yeah, let's agree with you. So let's start this the 1st of August. Am I doing anything different the 1st of August than I was doing the 1st of July? Probably not. But I suppose over the years we've looked at how do we extend the rotation, because the only way that you can grow more grass in the autumn is extend the rotation. It's as simple as that. And we've looked at the scenarios of and you would have all heard this before, of say that 2 days a week. So it's each week in August, you start at 21 days, 23, 25, 27, and when you get to the end of August, you're up to the 30 days. But what I found in that scenario is that you can get really good growth rates in August. And sometimes when you get to the middle of August or 20th of August, you actually have too much grass, and suddenly you have a mess very, very fast. And what I mean by that is you have paddocks then that need to be taken out, and the end of August is too late for taking them out. So it's a bit like non-negotiables. So I suppose the way I've tried to work it is, how do you simplify this? How do you make it easier? And to take that sort of, uncertainty out of it, because I like to be in a position where we're in control of things. I mentioned at the start, and that's where I would have felt we were a good number of years ago, and I think it's important that you stay in control. So what we try to do is that end of July, period, maybe we're lucky enough that we've 75 hectares, 20 of it is leased, that's on the milking platform outside us. So we take a portion of that at the end of July and, just cut it for silage. Okay, so it's bale silage, it's just taken out, and I suppose, you can decide yourself how much you want to do, and then we just work away on our 21 to 23 days through August. We get to the end of August, we might be at 24 days, and then this block comes into us on the 5th or 6th of September. We get 5 or 6 days out of it, and we automatically just slip to 30 days. And that has worked really, really well, and I suppose for 2025, I tried something that we hadn't tried before, and I think you need to get brave at grass, you need to learn grass, you need to get the knowledge, and you'll just improve with it. What we did was, we had, 4 or 5 hectares of ground that it was actually cut for silage twice, so it was cut let's just say the middle of June, and early June, and it was cut again maybe early July, and the only reason for that was because we were doing a job at the back of the house and we actually couldn't graze it for the July time, so we had to cut it again. So what I actually did, you know, as a result of that was, so it was just cut twice. We actually left that grow for 55 days, okay, and grazed it at the beginning of September. And it was just something, you know, maybe we wouldn't do it every year if the weather came against us, we've got caught. Like, you can go all the negatives all you want, but it was a really, really good thing to do in 2025. We got 8 days out of it, I'd say. We were probably grazing close on 4 tonne, and there was no setback in yield. The solids went up, and the quality of the grass that came back was no issue with it whatsoever. So this is just something we tried. I'm not saying we go there again or anything. It was like deferred grazing, I think they call it in New Zealand. It wouldn't work for everyone, but to me it was brilliant to be able to do it. So I suppose that's where I'm coming from, Michael. That's how we extend the rotation, because you need to get to 30 days at the beginning of September. Obviously then, you know, the last application, nitrogen goes out, Michael. You know, as we go through September, we're going to hit our peak yield probably there that 20 to 25th of September of, you know, 1100, 1150, you know, of overall farm cover at that stage. And then, you know, we're probably going into covers at that stage, probably of 2.6 or 2.7. And then the last round is on 40 days or whatever. And that's how we do. We're probably at the stage now where we're putting a bit more emphasis on the clover paddocks, to make sure the clover paddocks are probably grazed, you know, I suppose, at that sort of early October, so that they're grazed again in mid-November, and I suppose you don't want to go over the winter with too much grass in the paddocks. So that's what I think. To finish on it, Michael, it's the rotation length in September decides what grass you have in the spring.
Similar to John, I suppose we from the 1st of August we're doing the same thing as what we've been doing all summer, which is keeping, you know, we're watching the KPI I watch is cover per cow, and you know, we're keeping that, you know, 180, 190, even 200, and then you start to build cover. But it's purely based on farm cover. So you walk the farm at least once a week, if not twice a week, and you base your decision how your farm cover is. The goalpost is 1100 mid-September, and if the end of August you're not on track, you've a couple of options at your disposal, like what Lauren said earlier on, depending on milk price and depending on the gap between growth and demand, and how much you need to add to farm cover. Do you go in with ration, or do you go in with silage, or what to fill that gap? Well, 1100 is the target. I don't always hit it. And then I suppose one thing I find is once you do hit 1100, and grazing in autumn is tricky because it coincides with kind of, you know, taking a step back from the farm, getting some time away, and it also coincides with ground conditions getting tricky. And you know, kind of when you look at it on pasture based, theoretically, you know, if your demand, if there isn't much of a difference between growth and demand, you know, you should hold that cover. Or if there's only a difference of 10, you know, you shouldn't drop it any more than 70. But it's tricky in autumn because you can go through 2 weeks grass in 5 days, if you don't manage it. So I think it's really important to have your finger on the pulse consistently throughout autumn to manage that farm cover and protect it, particularly when there's weather events or when ground conditions deteriorate.
Your challenge in autumn is slightly more rain autumn. I think in the part of the country more rain.
Yeah.
How do you know? I know you just kind of said it there, but how do you do it?
Yeah, so look, grazing infrastructure, say you kind of almost go into spring mode for pockets. You know, if you got a heavy day's rain, you know, you have to be organised and ready, that the reelers, pigtails, everything's ready to go, that if you have to go on 12-hour wires for a period of, you know, 3-4 days, that it's not a big job, there's no witchcraft involved in it. And you know, kind of having your finger on the pulse to go and do that, keeping an eye on the forecast, and being proactive about it. And that grazing infrastructure in terms of spur roadways, gaps, it's times like that when those things really start to pay off.
Okay, we're closing this off. What are we closing?
My closing cover was just shy of 800, and it's a thing. I suppose the last 2 or 3 years I've noticed that I used to be able to close at, say, I don't know if it's a thing with less chemical nitrogen or not, but I used to be able to close at 700 and open at 1100. Now I got caught swimming with my trunks down last spring because I was 200 below target, and that had to come from somewhere else, and that was a big expense. So whatever's happening, we're probably getting a lower winter growth. So we need to close at least 800 to achieve that 1100 opening, probably even a bit higher.
John, just
Yeah, very similar, Michael. No difference really. Yeah, it's closing probably 750 and trying to open over 1,000. Yeah.
So the cows in your place, when are they calving? When is your first cow calving? John.
Sorry, Michael. Yeah. So look, I suppose I would have got caught a number of years ago where we, I think you mentioned, Michael, you mentioned in your presentation where we just had too many cows calved, and a bad spell of weather came in March, and it was just a really costly fortnight in March. So we just have calving dates gone back, Michael. So there's no heifer inseminated or cow inseminated in the month of April. So the heifers are inseminated on the 1st of May and the cows start on the 8th or 9th of May for insemination. So we may get 1 or 2 in January, Michael, but really truly the calving date on ICBF start is sort of the 8th or 9th of February.
Yeah, so our planned start to calf this year is the 9th of February. It's typically the 9th or 10th of February. If we synchronise the heifers and we synchronise, we suppose, the 50 elite cows to do them all, so all our dairy straws are used day one. And if that falls on a Sunday, then breeding gets pushed out by a day. But typically the 9th or 10th of February start to calf.
What's the milage regime?
Yeah, so
You won't be covered as
yeah, so Michael, we split it open covers 1,050. So I suppose the key thing what I'm trying to do, ladies and gentlemen, is in the springtime. What I'm trying to do is get the cows settled at grass. Okay, so get the cows settled at grass, and that's probably trying to be consistent in what you do. So whether that's out at a particular time, in at a particular time, milking times or whatever, it's just getting cows settled at grass so that you can get the increase then as their appetite increases as the weeks go on. It's easier for everything to work on. So I suppose just on nitrogen, Michael, look, I suppose we're looking at probably 70 kilos by the 1st of April and 100 kilos in total by the 1st of May. But it's using the slurry, Michael, really stringently in the springtime, and it's about getting it out after the grazing, getting it out of the paddocks that need it. And I think you mentioned it there on your slides, a bit like the fertilizer stuff, the timing. And it's not always easy to do it, but if you're organised and planned, you can achieve it. It's probably more yesterday rather than tomorrow, Michael.
What does it look like for you spring out? What is it? What are you going with?
So Michael, I suppose there's a third of the farm that gets nutting in the first round. I presume that's where the question is coming from. So we'll graze off a third of the farm there, Michael, so there won't have any nitrogen got. We might go a third of it with a half bag of urea first of all, and a third of it will get slurry. So the lightest third would have got the slurry, and then, we'll follow on with a bag of urea in the next round. But I don't really mind if it all doesn't get nitrogen the first time, because I've seen over the years where, we'll get a better return for it, in March. I do understand that we need a bit in February to keep the thing going, but I definitely don't do all the farm in February, Michael, with a half bag of urea.
So we cover the whole farm, so the lower covers, we'll suppose you split it into 3/3. The third with the lowest covers, we get our lagoon slurry early on, just get it down and drop it down, and the rest we get chemical in. And it typically gets, I suppose, it gets an application early February and it gets an application again mid-March. And again, then probably its last blanket application will be in early April, and then we start following the cows around. But we typically actually deliberately try and save, which goes against the Teagasc blueprint to a degree. Our lagoon slurry, our lagoon would nearly be full around the 1st of May, because we find that's the perfect fertilizer for our clover paddocks. To kind of not give it any chemical in. Clover by itself doesn't seem to be enough. And the lagoon slurry by itself doesn't seem to be enough, but the two together work really well.
On the high covers in the autumn, John, you mentioned grazing 2/6, and you might comment on it as well. I mean, in the ideal world, in the ideal autumn, it's fine to be grazing these covers, but is there a risk building average farm cover too high some autumns, and it seems to be more autumns than we're getting these wetter autumns, and have you a higher risk trying to get the residual down going to those high covers?
When you look at it, and we look at, especially when you get into the August, September time, you know, to answer the question, you know, what happens out there, we're not building half enough grass in the autumn. That's what the pasture-based data is telling us, that we're about 300 or 400 off of where we should be. So that's not, it's happening on some farms, John, but to be honest with you, when you look at when you look at getting grass into, getting what John was talking about there, and probably Kevin as well, when you want to push rotation in the autumn, you have to push up pre-grazing yield to a certain level to be able to carry days on the platform. Otherwise you're going to be putting in supplement to carry those days, and some farms may have to put in supplement in August to carry days to get pre-grazing yield up. But lifting pre-grazing yield is one thing that we're probably not doing enough of in the autumn, and we're going back into it to look at that from a research perspective. But yes, from my perspective, it's catching a lot of farmers out there because they don't have enough grass into September and October.
Yeah, and can I just come in, Michael, as well? If the clean out in the previous round is really, really good, you know, then I think 2.5 is no issue whatsoever. And if you do get really heavy rain for a day or two, you can just skip 1 or 2 and just, you know, you come back to it again. Once it's actually not raining down top of the cows, you know, you can manage them in the autumn as well. So the clean outs in the previous round is probably the kernel to that.
Another question there, Ed? Yeah.
Michael, you highlighted the importance of the average farm cover for the start of the second round coming through the spring. And John, you indicated that you have had springs where you've had struggled to get grass into the cows. And so where's the discipline that the two farmers use to make sure that they hit that correct average farm cover for the first week of April?
Yeah. So I suppose, like that first week of April, you know, I suppose it's very important to hitting the right cover, that you actually get it on both sides, that you don't, you know, the more important thing is that you don't run out of grass in April as well. So it's very important that cover doesn't drop below that. You know, I'd probably be happier to stay at the 650 and making sure I don't drop below that. And that's just really monitoring the growth rates, you know, through that sort of 3 weeks in March, and just, you know, matching that with what cows that are out and what cows that are grazing. Other than that, that's it. I mean, it's just having the knowledge and trying to be ahead of it and trying to predict. You're watching the weather as well, and things can change really, really fast at that time in that couple of days in April. So, you know, sometimes I think we just, you know, be careful not to overcomplicate it at that stage, because you just need to be walking the farm and really watching it at that stage.
Another 2 questions down the back here, or one with John Farrell.
Just a question there for Kevin and John on the clover. Just when, at the end of the year, when you do your closing cover, we say a paddock that had good clover on it, you close it early, and say you close it whenever. Do you find in the spring the opening cover might be very high in that paddock? How does the clover survive, or do you have an issue with that? Like, would you find that maybe you could end up with a cover of maybe 1250 on that paddock, and the clover is kind of smothered out, and what effect has it going forward?
Yeah, it's an excellent point, because it's definitely one I found, and I suppose back in 21-22, when there was probably only a quarter of the farm with a high clover content, it was very easy to have then paddocks at a low cover. But I suppose as more and more the platform becomes a high clover content, you're inevitably going to have paddocks that, for whatever reason, you know, fall into that category of opening at 1200 with a high clover content on it, and there's no way of sugarcoating it. In my experience, unscientifically, that it hurts clover. It definitely does. The only thing that I can do to mitigate that is to try and graze it early, really early if I can, to try and, you know, help the clover rather than leaving it slip to the second half of March. Is probably all we can do.
Perfect answer, Kevin. Very quickly to the 3 panelists, topic discussed, and we've 1 question down the back. Mick, you're a fan? Huh?
Not a fan.
No, I'm shocked. I thought the Teagasc advice has changed, no?
Not a fan, no. Look, it's something. I was in New Zealand, I thought, a couple of years ago, and this kind of gave me my picture of topping. 25 hectare paddock out in front of me, and I just said, just asked the guy that was.
Speak into it.
I just asked the farmer that was there. It was 25 hectare paddock, huge paddock, and I said, you know, how do you fix pasture quality? And he goes, grazing management. And one thing I would say to the audience here is, we're getting better grass utilisation of varieties. We've got the sub-index for grass utilisation in the PPI. That's coming through, it's completely reflected at farm. Topping, you grazing cows they can graze tighter than any mechanical. And it's just about getting the pre-grazing yield right, going into paddocks. So, John was on about walking the farm twice a week, and you really have to get to that stage. Now, that alleviates sending the young fella or yourself out to correct mistakes that happen because the pre-grazing yield is too high. So, to me, there's a way of getting rid of some of these things that are happening at farm level, and topping is one thing that, if we get grazing management right, we don't have to do.
So do your job, as Roy would say. John, do you own a topper, and Kevin, do you own a topper?
Yes.
One answer. Do you have one?
No, there's no topper, John. But the point, I suppose, what I'd like to do is just waste in the system is topping. It's just waste in the system, and I don't think you can afford to have it, right? Because it's costing you. Okay, so it's costing you to top. It's delaying the pasture. It's grass wasted, and we're good at growing grass, so we don't need to waste it. And I suppose Michael Ward sat here last night and he mentioned dopamine effect. And to me, like where do you get that? Like, where do you get the buzz? And to me, it's when you look at the paddocks at the end of the year. And this year we had 9 or 10 paddocks that had no mechanical intervention. Right? So 9 or 10 paddocks, no mechanical intervention. Every other year up to 2025, that's probably been closer to 20 paddocks. It's just because the growth rate across our farm was so good in 2025 that we took a crop of bales maybe off 2/3 of the paddocks. But normally it's 2/3 of the paddocks that get no mechanical intervention, right? And to me that's brilliant. So how are we doing that? It's really that short rotation, and I suppose whether you call it unfortunate or fortunate, I actually had the same discussion group with me twice in the month of June in 2025. Okay, so this is the period where topping takes place. Okay, so they called you the first week of June, they called you the last week of June. Okay, so how do you manage to get the pastures right? And I suppose what we had to do was, we had to go back into paddocks, maybe after 15 days, and just graze them out. And once the cows are used to pastures and grazing pastures, it worked for us. And we were able to get it. We were able to get a few paddocks right that were maybe not 100% that time, just by getting the cows back in by shortening the rotation.
Kevin, you have a topper.
So this is going to be contentious. I think they'll probably cut my mic in about 10 seconds.
Keep it rolling.
I actually disagree with the two lads.
Finally.
Because
everyone else was thinking, Kevin.
I struggle to maintain sward quality and consistently keep swards capable of getting 2+ kilos of milk solids from cows in front of them without correction. And I don't own a tractor and I don't own a dismower. I use all contractors. I have a local young fella and I text him if I want a paddock topped, paddock 13, and you come in the next morning and it's topped. So it's not that it's a drain on labour, you're sitting on a tractor driving around and it's a few quid for him. It works. It's a necessary evil and you can't do too much of it. But trying to keep, maintain sward quality by baling alone, or rather, not to go completely against the lads, but probably to rephrase it, but not to correct paddocks solely with a baler is difficult because you'll leave yourself too short in terms of you'll have to just take too much out of the system and have to pinch cows then to get back on course if you get them.
Curiosity is something that I've been testing our own co-op to try and do, given the importance of it. We'd say lime and fixing lime, given its importance for clover. When you're doing your soil sampling, can you do a soil sample for pH only? And I was trying to get our own co-op to try and push and try and get that rolled out to our farmers, but can it be done? Is it as simple as just getting a little paper and putting it in to test the pH, or is there more to it?
Makes you want to go first?
Basic soil test that's out there is pH, P and K and S, I think it is. So that's the basic one I got. The hard to ask a lab now, to be honest with you, to run a soil sample and just do pH.
Yeah, the basic test is pH, PK, and...
Yeah, PK and S.
Yeah.
No, but to be honest with you, you need the whole lot. You need the three.
Question kind of in relation to paddock size and getting cleanouts. How big are your paddocks in relation to 12, 24, 36 or bigger over X? And subsequently, is there a habit or a violence of moving cows mid-day moves or evening moves at 7, 8 o'clock?
So firstly, paddock size, it's something that we've worked on, and particularly then, as you're expanding, your herd size is changing, so you're having to change it. One thing I'd say is west of Ireland, we've a lot of small paddocks, and a lot of it is to do what Michael discussed last night, but historically. But if I've learned anything, is that farmers in the west of Ireland probably have more of an emotional attachment with their stone walls than they do with their wives. So you certainly can't remove stone walls. So to go in and just take out stone walls, you may as well just consider yourself evicted. So what we've done to get around that is knock gaps, and you join up 3-4 fields together, and after a couple of grazings the cows actually learn it, and when you go to lock them in, they're evenly distributed amongst all 3 or 4. So same would apply to a ditch or whatever, and that's how we've got around that. So about 80% of our paddocks are 36 hours, and some of them we just can't make 36 hours just because of the way they're shaped or where they're placed or whatever.
Yeah, I think 36 hours is probably the ideal scenario. I suppose we have challenges where we are farming with the Morningstar River running right through the farm, and also with 2 or 3 public roads, crossing them at different angles. So it creates, I suppose, challenges rather than problems. And the challenge is probably something you can always try and deal with the best you can. So I suppose what we've done at maybe different times is if cows are heading a different direction, we might leave 100 back in the paddock, whatever, if we have to clean that out. We don't like this moving at 11 o'clock in the day or 9 o'clock at night. So I try to keep it as simple as we can. And okay, it won't work if the 2 paddocks are side by side, but we can normally gauge that and know the paddock that probably is going to cause us a small bit of hassle, and be ready for that when it comes around the next time.
Okay, one sentence, one key message from each of you before we go. I'll start with you, Mick. You're the most used to doing this public speaking. We didn't rehearse this, so one thing, one sentence, what's it going to be for all the audience?
Run off the farm summary report and benchmark your farm against what I put up there today.
John Mack.
I think everyone in this room is good at what they do, okay? Just pick a few things that maybe we've said to you today, because that's what I do at every conference I go to and every walk I go to. Just pick a couple of things and just get yourself better. Okay.
Cost of production. There's definitely been a slippage and an indiscipline that has slipped in. A guy told me once it takes 1 year to recover from a bad milk price, and it takes 3 years to recover from a good milk price. So definitely an element of that this year. Okay,
I'm going to do a quick couple of thank yous first. Liz and Maura, they've done a huge amount of work, and the rest of the committee that I'm actually on, although I wasn't most involved until today. The Yarra competition, just a reminder there that if you can fill it out, I want to especially thank Mick, John and Kevin, especially Kevin and John. It's not easy to come up on stage in front of a big crowd like this. You would be nervous, and I thought the 3 lads were absolutely fantastic. We're not going to announce the Dairy Summer Tour location today, but what I can say is there's a brilliant tour in the pipeline. We'd love to see everyone there. We had a fantastic event during July. Michael Ward has featured a lot. He's down the back over here, so some of you might be sitting with him for lunch. Very good talk last night, and some of you get chatting to him. I think he's very enterprising, is what he said, and he'll be taking discussion groups maybe the odd time as well for a small fee. I can broker it for you there if you want. We'll do a quick round of applause for everyone on stage.